be to God for the glory, the joy, the gift of this day, a gift of God to his holy people. I would like to express my very personal gratitude first to Father Andrews for your kindness in inviting me to participate in this wonderful occasion in the life of the Paulist community. It's a great privilege for me to be with you. I'm grateful too to your brothers for the way in which their own priestly hearts and witness have really moved these men to be drawn to the charism of the Paulist community. Thank you for that witness and that brotherhood that you have been extending to them over these years and will continue to do so. I think all of us in the church owe a debt of gratitude to Deacon Michael and Deacon Richard's families for raising them to be the men that they are today, for sharing with them love and faith, their goodness and friendship. So we're very, very grateful to you for the gift that you give to the Paulists and to the whole church. And maybe most importantly, I'd like to express my gratitude to God for the two of you, who today give us that beautiful witness of a response of the heart to the call of the Lord. I had the opportunity to speak with each of you by video, age of COVID, but it was a very moving conversation for me. As you both know, this is the first time I will ordain anybody.
What?
And so I was deeply moved to hear the stories of your vocation, of your call. Each of you has a kind of long journey that has brought you to this moment, and a very unique one. I was very struck in listening to you, Deacon Richard, to hear of the kind of the pilgrimage you made around life, finding so many different callings, but always that one thing that eluded you until you felt among the Paulists and in the life of faith and the family of God that you had finally come home again. I think too that your love for and capacity for juggling, it may come in handy because you're going to find in priesthood there's a lot of juggling that goes on with daily life.
Well,
but most importantly, my prayer with you and for you today is that longing that you have to be that minister of joy to God's people will be fulfilled. May God grant you that. I invite all of us to pray for that particular longing of your heart. Deacon Michael, you too have had a journey of your own. It struck me listening to you that the heart of your vocation story is really a story of relationship. You found much success in life, but there was that something more, something you knew in childhood with your family, something your heart was searching for, something you found in a Paulist parish. Not only receiving that gift of relationship, but actively responding and giving yourself over to the service of others. And then came that beautiful moment when the Lord really gave you that sense of consolation and presence, challenging you to deepen that relationship. And so ironically, you went off to be alone, to walk that long Camino, to spend a winter in Maine. But in that alone time, the Lord spoke to your heart and taught you that gift of relationship with God and with God's people. And so my prayer for you today is that your longing to be compassion for God's people, to evangelize them with that loving acceptance of the Lord, will come to pass in your ministry. And I invite all of us to pray for that longing of your heart. It was impressive, by the way, to hear about your many experiences, life experiences and accomplishments. I know you have worked very hard in your studies to prepare for this day. But fundamentally, today is not really about your skill sets or your life experience or the ideas that you're going to bring to evangelization and ministry. All of those things are well and good and have their place, but they're not what this day is about. Before you were in the womb, I knew you. This day is really about the gift of yourselves. When I was a young priest, I was ordained a long time ago in a galaxy far away. But as a young priest, about 6 months out in my first parish, a Maryknoll missionary came to the parish to preach. His name is Father Peter Lejac, a medical doctor as well as a priest. And on that day in his preaching, he told the story of his ministry in Tanzania. And the story he told pierced my heart and has remained with me every day since. And so I hope you don't mind if I share that story with you, because I like to make a point with it today. He talked about going to Tanzania and working as a doctor and a missionary out there in the countryside, far from the cities. And this was in the late 80s, when the AIDS epidemic was raging across Tanzania. And of course, as a doctor out there in the rural countryside, he never had enough protective equipment. No goggles, no gloves, no masks. And yet he had to operate on people barehanded. He had to deliver babies, help people with terrible injuries. And he shared with us that day in that church about the terrible fear that he felt, because he knew so many of the people he was treating, they were sick. And he feared that without that protective equipment, he too would get a deadly disease that was so frightening to people and people did not understand. He lived with this terrible fear day in and day out. He said that in the nighttime, he would have terrible nightmares and wake up in a cold sweat and think, I must be sick. And he said this went on for months. He almost couldn't keep it up. And then came one day when he was at the altar celebrating the Eucharist. And he said those words that we priests say over and over and over again. This is my body given for you. This is my blood poured out for you. And Father Peter said that in that moment, in those few seconds, he had a kind of infinite experience of the presence and the mercy and the love of God. And he realized, he said in some ways for the first time in his priesthood, that these words were his words too. That in fact this was the call of the priest. This is my body given for you. This is my blood poured out for you, to live a life in communion with the Lord who loves us to the end. And he said from that day, the fear stopped stalking him. From that day, he understood what the Lord was asking of him in that place and in that moment and in that work. Again, he pierced my heart. I was a new priest in those first months, and you'll experience this too. People love a new priest. There's not a lot of suffering in the first few months. Everyone thinks you're the greatest thing ever. You're the conquering hero, right? But in those few moments, this priest taught me to think and pray about those words that I say every day. They're words really that the church has been grappling with for 2,000 years. Remember, for those first disciples in this Easter season we celebrate, their experience of Good Friday was devastating. Most of them ran away, didn't understand, they couldn't make sense of it. It took time for them, didn't it, to really come to grasp what the Lord was asking of them, what the Lord was offering to them. And so in a very real sense, the Eucharist, the source and the summit of our life, really is at the heart of how we continue to try to understand what the Lord is asking of us in all of our joys and sorrows, in those moments when we feel abandoned or lost. The Eucharist is at the heart of it. And over these many years, I've thought and prayed much about this truth. It's kind of awesome and terrible all at the same time. I mean, St. Paul probably expressed it best in his writings. St. Paul came to understand, maybe sooner than others, that in our minds, Our salvation somehow had to be that we were worthy, or that we would do the right thing, or say the right words, or perform the right ritual. This is the way things are in the world. You're supposed to be good, and then you get your reward. But Paul came to understand that the will of God, the plan of God, was so unexpected. Now, I know that when we study the Old Testament today, we look through that prism of the New Testament, we see the prophecy, and we recognize how the Christ is already there in the Old Testament. But for those first Christians, this was not obvious. They thought God would arrive on the chariot in glory and deliver them from their suffering and from death. They never expected what God in fact planned from the beginning and did, to give the gift of his own son. Think back to the story of Isaac and Abraham. When Abraham is asked in that terrible, awful, painful moment to sacrifice his only beloved son. The story kind of drags it out, and if you pay attention to it, you should really feel awful. A father walking to a mountain to kill his son. His son who carries that wood up Mount Moriah. His son who also is a man of faith, a young man of faith, who lays down upon the altar and does not fight back as his father binds him. But remember, in that moment, so terrifying, with that awful image of a father with a knife above his son, it doesn't happen. God does not demand the life of Abraham's only beloved son. It's a mysterious story, and one that can't make any sense, really, until you witness the passion of Jesus Christ, until you hear in the gospel God say from the clouds, "This is my beloved son." For what God did not ask of Abraham, God gives. That which reconciles us, which saves us and redeems us. It is, in fact, a human heart filled with love. It is that act of the Lord Jesus of perfect love and trust to the Father for the sake of the world, the pouring out of his life that we touch, the wounds we touch here in this Eucharist. That is what saves us. He is priest and victor. He does not offer something else. He offers the whole of himself. Utter trust, utter faithfulness. It's the absolute heart, is it not, of what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. Certainly what it means to be a priest and to be a religious. Your participation in that offering of Jesus Christ. This is what St. Paul reveals to us so powerfully. That is your salvation, my salvation, our salvation. We don't have to check off the list. We don't have to achieve it on our own. But what we have to do is respond to that gift of love, to be loved and to love in return, as we heard so beautifully from John's Gospel today. Again, to participate in that work of the Lord Jesus, which is healing and reconciliation for the world. And so if this mystery, the mystery of this altar, the mystery of our participation in Jesus' self-offering, if that's the heart of the faith, then I'd like to suggest a couple of things to you today. The first is that, in effect, these words become your words. They're the words of the church. They're the words, really, of every baptized disciple of the Lord. You speak them with and for the people of God. But they must become your words. They must be, in fact, the pattern of your life. And this is my body given for you. This is my blood poured out for you. What the Lord is asking of you today is nothing more, nothing less than all of you. Everything. Not your accomplishments and resume and talents and book knowledge. He's asking for the gift of your heart, that you trust in his will, that you live by his grace, that you participate in his love. There's the charism of every priest. These words, the words of the Mass, the words we speak for and with the people of God. I'd like to also remind you that the mystery that we touch here today is not necessarily a mystery of glory and conquest and domination. That again is the way of the world. The mystery you will participate in here is a mystery of blood, sweat, and tears, of humiliation and suffering and death. That too is part of your call. If you are to offer yourself, then you must bleed. There's the truth of it. Your brothers can tell you about this. It's that truth of the suffering of an authentic priestly heart. When I was teaching in the seminary not long ago, I would half-jokingly say to the seminarians, well, it's the apocalypse. Now I tell the priests I work with, it's the apocalypse. There are so many challenges that lie ahead of you in your priestly service. So many. Of course, from the biblical and Christian point of view, we need not fear the apocalypse. It is the passing away of the world, but always in the apocalypse, when we know the love of God, there are those seedlings of new life coming to life. The secret, really, is to have the humility to open our eyes and the hearts to what is in fact growing, what is in fact new life, and not waste ourselves on that which is already passing away. But to do this, you must die to self. You must accept that truth of suffering and pain, even of humiliation. It's the reason why in a few minutes you're going to lay down on the floor, to show your willingness to give it all, to die to yourself, to live for others, to live that mystery which draws the human heart. It's why you've come to this moment. We want to love and be loved, but there are so many other things that send us in other directions. Your call is to live that self-gift so clearly that people will hear not your voice, but that voice of the Good Shepherd. And they will see in your self-offering his gift and love for them. So I guess what I'm really saying to you today is that in this ordination, in the Eucharist that we're about to celebrate, and in every Eucharist you will celebrate in the course of your priestly ministry, you must remember this truth, to make yourself one with that offering. In a way, I'm being a little bit manipulative today. I'm tying what I'm saying to the words you say every day, because I want those words every day to pierce your hearts and remind you every day of who the Lord is for you and what the Lord invites you to live that love, to magnify that love for his people. If you today make yourselves the offering, if you yourselves become the victim today, then the Lord, he will make you his priest. I'm sure you'll have many wonderful things that you're going to accomplish and great ideas and creativity that you'll bring to ministry. We all hope all of that happens. And we hope that you find much joy in that ministry and fulfillment, and that the people of God love you as you love them. But at the heart of the matter is this truth that you lay down your life, that you offer yourself, that you become victim so that he make you his priest. That's my prayer for you today in this holy moment in your lives. And so thanks be to God for that call that the Lord has offered to you, that hand of friendship that he reaches out to you now. Please God, it will give you many years of living that truth of the Eucharist. This is my body given for you. This is my blood poured out for you.